Jacob Reed had witnessed plenty of odd things in his 43 years, but nothing came close to what made him slam the brakes on his rusted F-150 that evening. In the middle of a lonely gravel road cutting through the pine woods stood a German shepherd. Its paws were caked in mud, ribs showing through its thin coat, and clamped in its jaws was a half-eaten piece of bread, the kind that looked like it had been crushed at the bottom of a backpack. The dog shuffled forward, dropped the bread into the dirt, and then did something Jacob had never seen a dog do before. It lowered its front legs and bowed its head, not lying down, not sitting, but kneeling as though in surrender. Its eyes locked onto Jacob's, filled with a desperate plea. Something inside Jacob twisted. For a long moment, silence and tension filled the space between them. He rolled down his window. "You lost, boy?" he asked. The dog didn't budge. "Bread won't get you far out here." The shepherd let out a low whine, a sound heavy with sorrow rather than fear. Jacob pushed open the truck door and stepped out. The wind carried the chill of early autumn. When the trees grew brittle, frost crept in early, and coyotes prowled boldly after sundown. Jacob crouched beside the animal. Its body quivered, not from the cold, but from something deeper, urgent. He glanced at the bread again, and that's when the dog turned. No bark, no growl. Just 3 deliberate steps into the trees before stopping to glance back. An order, a request, a desperate invitation. Jacob's gut tightened. His boots crunched across dead leaves as he followed. About 50 yards into the woods, the smell hit him. Rotting timber, damp canvas, something sour like spoiled milk, and another odor far worse. Then he saw her. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, curled on a worn military blanket beside an overturned backpack. Her lips were cracked, her skin pale, hair plastered to her forehead. She wasn't unconscious, but she wasn't fully awake either. Her chest lifted in shallow, rattling breaths. The shepherd rushed to her, licking her face and nudging her arm with his paw. "Jesus," Jacob muttered, dropping to his knees. "Kid." He touched her forehead. It was blazing hot. Fever. She had no coat, no shoes, no water. Just a child stranded in the woods with only a dog to look after her. Jacob gathered her carefully in his arms. Her head lolled against his shoulder, but her tiny hand clutched something around her neck, a small silver locket. There was no time to ask questions. He sprinted back toward the truck, the dog trotting close beside him, never taking its eyes off the girl. 10 minutes later, the F-150 screeched into the lot of a small urgent care clinic on the edge of town. Jacob kicked the door open and shouted for help. "She's burning up," he called, laying her on a triage bed. Found her in the woods. No parents, no ID. Just this dog and that piece of bread. The nurse, young but quick in her movements, glanced at him. "Your relation?" "None. I just found her." Within seconds, the room filled with staff, wires, oxygen masks, machines beeping nonstop. The dog paced outside the glass door, tail stiff, ears alert, refusing to lie down or leave. Jacob sat waiting, fists clenched, until half an hour later the doctor emerged. Severe dehydration. Fever over 103. Malnourished. We're running blood work now, but her body's in full fight mode. If she hadn't been brought in, she wouldn't have survived. Jacob nodded, finishing the thought for him. The dog led me straight to her. Like he knew she was running out of time. Through the glass, the shepherd still hadn't looked away from the girl. Later, cleaned up and resting by her hospital bed, staff scanned the collar around his neck. No information came up. Military style. one of the nurses noted quietly. It looked customized, but there was no registry match, no chip, none at all. Jacob squinted. So what is he then? Just a stray? I wouldn't call this dog a stray, she replied. He knew exactly what he was doing. As the night dragged on, Jacob sat slumped in a plastic chair, peering through the window. The girl hardly moved, but whenever she stirred, the canine would immediately get up, lick her hand, then curl back beside her. At around 3 a.m, she woke for the first time. Jacob rushed inside with the nurse at his side. Her eyelids fluttered, her expression pale and disoriented. The first word she breathed out, barely more than a whisper, wasn't Mom, Dad, or help. It was Hunter. The dog's ears shot up at once. He padded to the bed and laid his head down near her arm. She managed the faintest smile before murmuring, "You found him?" Jacob froze. Who exactly did she mean? The dog? Or someone else? And what had this animal really brought to Jacob on that deserted stretch of road? A scrap of bread, or the start of a story that hadn't yet been told? Morning arrived gray and hushed, rain pattering against the clinic's windows. Jacob hadn't slept a moment. He still sat in the same chair, arms folded, boots leaving dried leaves scattered on the floor. The girl, whose name they still didn't know, was now stable. Her fever had broken sometime after midnight, thanks to IV fluids, antibiotics, and a nurse who refused to leave her bedside. But the real change came from what the nurse called the dog effect. The second Hunter curled up beside her hospital bed, her heart rate steadied. He hadn't left her once. Jacob rubbed his tired eyes and leaned forward. "You ever going to tell me who you really are, Hunter?" The dog didn't so much as blink. He just kept watch, calm but alert, as if protecting something sacred. The girl stirred again, her voice a touch stronger now. She blinked slowly, eyes adjusting to the light. When she spotted Hunter, her lips curved in the faintest smile. Her hand reached for his fur, clutching a tuft near his collar as she whispered again, "Hunter." Jacob stepped closer. "Hey there, kiddo." Her gaze shifted to him. A flicker of fear passed over her face, then confusion, then something gentler. "Are you police?" she asked weakly. Jacob gave a short laugh. "No, sweetheart. Just a guy with lousy luck and a decent truck." "Hunter brought you," she said. "Yeah, guess he did." She coughed, her voice fragile. "Where's Daddy?" A hollow feeling opened in Jacob's stomach. "We're still trying to figure that out." Her small hand went to the locket hanging at her throat. "Daddy said not to leave the trailer, that Hunter would stay with me." Jacob exchanged a grim look with the nurse who had just entered. What's your name?" the nurse asked gently. "Ella," the girl said. "Do you know your last name, sweetheart?" Ella looked lost. "Daddy said not to use it. Said we had to stay quiet, or the bad men would come." Jacob's jaw tightened. Something about this didn't sit right. Out in the hall, he cornered the physician and the nurse. That kid's been out in the woods who knows how long. No parents, no ID, and now she's talking about hiding from bad men. "She's terrified," the nurse said softly. "Traumatized. She said her father told her to stay put in the trailer. And there was no one else when you found her?" Jacob shook his head. "Just her. And that dog. The only other things were an old army blanket, a child's backpack, and this." He pulled out a photograph he'd found in the pouch strapped to Hunter's side. It was water-stained and half-burned, an image of a man in uniform holding a young girl. Ella. The man in the photo looked younger than Jacob, maybe late 30s. A strong jaw, camouflage fatigues, a U.S. Army patch on his shoulder, no name visible. The nurse frowned. "You're sure that came from the dog?" Jacob nodded. It was tucked inside his pack. He carried it all the way to the road. The doctor leaned forward. "So you think the father's military?" "I think," Jacob said slowly, "we're only seeing half the story." Later that day, the sheriff showed up, a heavy-set man in his 60s named Clay Harrove. He'd known Jacob back in high school baseball and had never cared for him much since the divorce and bar fights. But this time, he came with a serious face. "So, let me get this straight," he said after Jacob explained it all for the third time. "So you're saying this dog dragged over a moldy piece of bread like some kind of messenger bird, led you into the forest, and that's where you stumbled across the girl?" "That's exactly how it happened." Sheriff Hargrove gave a low whistle. "Well, friend, you've walked right into a mess." "What do you mean?" Jacob asked. "In the last 2 weeks, we've had 3 people vanish, whole families, all former military, living off the grid. No leads, no tracks, nothing left behind." Jacob frowned. "You think this girl's one of them?" "Wouldn't surprise me," Hargrove replied. "We put together a task force, but so far it's been a dead end. The only thing we've come across are abandoned trailers and scorch marks." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "Scorch marks?" "Like someone burned away the evidence, fast and clean." That night, Jacob returned to the woods with his flashlight. Hunter padded beside him, silent and alert. The air around the trailer site felt colder, heavier, almost as if the ground itself remembered what had happened. Yellow tape marked the scene, but Jacob pushed past it, uneasy. Something was still there, something he'd overlooked. Hunter trotted ahead and scratched at the dirt near a rusted metal box wedged beneath the trailer frame. Jacob knelt, pried it loose, and opened it. Inside lay a rolled map, a USB drive, and a small velvet pouch. He untied it carefully, revealing 2 military dog tags. One read, "Ramsey Thomas, U.S. Army, blood typo positive." The other bore Hunter's ID number, K9 Service 6215-58924. Jacob let out a long breath. "So you weren't just any dog, were you?" Hunter sat back, chest rising and falling steadily, watching him. "I'll take a guess," Jacob muttered. "You weren't supposed to be left behind either." Back at the clinic, Ella had drifted into a deeper, calmer sleep. The nurse dimmed the lights and brushed the girl's hair from her face. Jacob handed her the tags. "His name's Thomas Ramsey," he said. "Army. I'm betting he's her father. The map points deep into the valley, and the USB drive." "What's on it?" she asked. "No idea. It's encrypted. But I know someone at the VA who might crack it." The nurse studied him closely. "Why are you doing this?" Jacob looked through the glass at Ella. "Because no child should suffer what she has. And because that dog carried a scrap of bread across a road to save her." Later that evening, Jacob brought Hunter back to his cabin. It was a small place, with a wood stove, fishing rods by the door, and a couch that groaned when you sat too hard. Hunter sniffed around the corners before curling up on the rug near the fire. Jacob poured himself coffee and sat on the steps. Outside, the sky glittered with stars, scattered like silver dust across black velvet. He sat there for a long while, weary hands folded together, his back aching. His life had never gone as planned, but now, because of a girl he barely knew and a war-trained dog, everything was different. Jacob Reed had spent most of his years believing he was invisible, just a worn-out welder from a logging town stuck in time. He wasn't the kind of man people turned to for help. He kept to himself, picked up odd jobs, and made sure the fish he caught from Clearwater Creek never went to waste. But now he had a sick child in the hospital, a military-trained dog asleep at his feet, and a box of evidence tied to a missing soldier, and maybe something worse. The next morning, just past 7, Jacob pulled into the Veterans Affairs building. The place always smelled faintly of dust and liniment. He held the USB drive like it might vanish if he let go. Behind the desk sat Bobby Harris, a retired Navy tech with thick glasses and even thicker opinions. He still owed Jacob a favor or two from years back when Jacob had patched his roof. "Morning," Jacob said. "You look like you slept in a ditch," Bobby muttered. "Close enough." Jacob set the drive on the counter. "Think you can open this?" Bobby raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly is it?" "Something a soldier hid before he disappeared." Maybe he meant it, for his daughter Bobby stared at the flash drive for a long moment before letting out a sigh. "Give me 20 minutes and a strong coffee." Meanwhile, Jacob sat in his truck, sipping bitter gas station coffee, trying to shake the tight feeling building in his chest. Ella's words wouldn't leave his mind. Daddy said not to use our name. Said we had to hide. His thoughts turned to the charred photograph, the map, the dog tags. Whatever Thomas Ramsey had been involved in, it wasn't just about war. It was about running. And now Jacob was tangled up in it. Bobby eventually came back, his expression dark. "Whatever's on that drive, it's nothing normal. Took me 15 minutes just to break past the first wall. There are encrypted folders, firewalled PDFs, satellite image caches, and stacks of reports stamped private. Do not duplicate." Jacob felt his pulse hammer. "Can you show me?" "I managed to print a single page. Anything more, and the system locks itself down." Bobby handed him a sheet of paper. Jacob's fingers went cold as his eyes fell on a black and white aerial photo. It showed a compound isolated in the wilderness, ringed with tall fencing. 2 black SUVs were parked outside, and in the corner was a timestamp. September 10th, 2025, 3:12 a.m. Coordinates were printed across the bottom. "Is that the same place marked on the map Hunter led me to?" Jacob asked. "Exact match," Bobby confirmed. He hesitated. "And Jacob, this isn't regular military. This is black site level." Jacob folded the page and slid it into his pocket. "What are you planning to do?" Bobby asked. "I'm going to find out what really happened out there." Back at the clinic, Ella was sitting upright for the first time. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her hands fiddled with the ties of her hospital gown while the nurse brushed her hair. Hunter lay curled beneath the bed, watchful, eyes fixed on everything. Jacob knocked lightly before stepping inside. "Hey, sunshine," he said. Ella's face brightened. "You came back." "Wouldn't miss it." She pointed toward his jacket. "That's Daddy's map, isn't it?" Jacob hesitated. "Yeah, Hunter led me to it. Daddy said if something happened, Hunter would know what to do." Jacob sat down on the edge of her bed. "Ella, do you remember what happened the night you were left in the woods?" Her smile faded and her gaze dropped. "There was shouting. Daddy said they found us. He told me to hide under the trailer. Hunter stayed with me. I didn't hear Daddy after that." Her voice cracked and tears welled up, though she refused to let them fall. "I waited so long." Jacob reached for her hand. "You were so brave. Hunter never left you. Not for a moment. I thought maybe you were one of the bad men," she whispered. Jacob's jaw tightened. I'm not. I swear it. That afternoon, Jacob drove out toward the valley alone. He didn't bring Hunter. Something about the coordinates unsettled him, and he couldn't risk the dog reliving whatever horrors he had escaped. The dirt road wound for miles with nothing but wilderness pressing in from all sides. Finally, his truck climbed a ridge, and there it was, the compound. Just like the photo, it stood deserted. The barbed wire fencing sagged, the SUVs were gone, the main building's roof partially collapsed. The place was silent, lifeless, with only the wind moving through it. Jacob grabbed a flashlight and stepped inside. The interior was gutted, papers smoldered in trash cans, walls charred, wires ripped from the walls. Whoever had occupied the site had left in a hurry. He moved carefully through what seemed like a control room, crunching glass beneath his boots. Then he spotted it. Half buried behind a toppled filing cabinet was a scorched clipboard, one page still intact. Project Whisper, Subject K, 9R621, Hunter. A chill ran through Jacob. He read the document slowly, his stomach sinking with every line. K9R621 was part of the Experimental Whisper program, developed for advanced threat detection, memory imprinting, and child protection through voice bonding. Paired with Operative Thomas Ramsey. 2 weeks after mission failure, Ramsey disappeared off-grid, suspected defection. Recovery protocol initiated. Neutralize operative, secure the child, decommission K9R621. Jacob dropped the clipboard, his chest tightening. They hadn't simply abandoned the soldier, they had tried to kill him. Ella and Hunter. As he drove back into town, it was hard to draw a steady breath. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was a cover-up, a buried government program, and a little girl who had been marked as a subject. That night, he returned to the clinic. Ella slept soundly. Hunter curled protectively beside her. The nurse greeted him at the door, smiling, twice that day, and even letting out a small laugh. Jacob returned a weak smile. He watched them through the glass, a bitter swirl of anger and sorrow twisting in his chest. He thought of all the times he'd wanted to vanish, all the nights he had slept in his truck, convinced the world wouldn't notice if he disappeared. But someone had noticed Ella. Hunter had. And now Jacob wasn't just involved, he was committed. Whoever these people were, they wouldn't get her, not while he was still breathing. Outside the clinic, he sat on his truck's tailgate and unlocked his phone. He called the only reporter he knew who wouldn't shy away from upsetting the wrong people, a woman named Rachel Kane. She answered on the third ring. Jacob Reed. Hell must be freezing. I've got a story for you. Oh yeah, what kind? The kind that could ruin careers, maybe governments. There was a pause. I'm listening, she said. Rachel Caney didn't scare easily. She had exposed fraud in D.C., uncovered secret prisons in Central America, and been blacklisted by enough three-letter agencies to fill a government bingo card. Later, sitting across from Jacob at a greasy diner off Route 17, she realized this might be her strangest assignment yet. Jacob slid a burned folder across the table. Rachel studied the heading, Project Whisper K9 R621 Hunter. She sipped her black coffee, leaning back. You sure this isn't a hoax? Jacob didn't flinch. It almost got a little girl killed. Rachel regarded him for a long moment. Tell me everything. Start from the bread. For an hour, Jacob laid it all out. The dog kneeling in the road, the feverish child in the woods, the shredded trailer, the encrypted USB, the coordinates, the compound, the names, the mission. Rachel mostly listened, jotting notes occasionally. her eyes fixed on him. Finally, she spoke. The government wouldn't greenlight something like this without a partner. Whisper sounds black budget, off the books. Probably DOD or DHS. They tried to kill a child, Jacob said. And they bred a dog to protect her. Not just bred, Rachel flipped through the printouts. Imprinted. Hunter was engineered to recognize voice commands, track a subject up to 4 miles, and develop deep protective instincts toward a child. And now she's just a 6-year-old in a hospital bed. Jacob's voice was low. And he's the only reason she's alive. Rachel closed the folder. That makes them both targets. Back at the clinic, Hunter sensed danger before anyone else. Rising from the foot of Ella's bed, his ears pricked, body taut. A low growl vibrated through his chest. The nurse noticed first. Hunter? What is it? Then they heard it. Heavy, deliberate footsteps down the hall. Not the shuffle of nurses, not the casual steps of parents. 2 men in dark suits and government lanyards appeared in the lobby. One flashed a badge, the other carried a black case under his arm. Jacob had just parked when he spotted them, and instinct screamed at him to run. He pushed through the front door and saw one of the men near Ella's room speaking to the nurse. The badge read, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Excuse me, Jacob said, stepping forward. The taller agent turned. Mr. Reed, depends on who's asking. Agent Wells. This is Agent Marston. We're here on a protective order for the girl. Protective? Jacob repeated, his voice edged with suspicion. She needs protection from you people, Jacob said sharply. We have reason to believe the child may be linked to a matter of national security, one of the agents replied. She's 6 years old, Jacob snapped. You don't need a warrant to terrify a kid. The agents exchanged a glance. The shorter one, Marston, stepped forward. We want to transfer the child to a secure facility for evaluation and safety. Her name is Ella, Jacob said firmly, and she's not going anywhere. Sir, this isn't a request. Jacob drew in a long breath, steadying himself. Then something no one expected happened. Hunter moved between them, muscles tense, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. His fur bristled, every hair on edge. Marston's hand went for his taser. Jacob acted first. The scuffle brought the sheriff and the head nurse running. Both demanded to see legal documentation. With no paperwork to show, the agents backed down, but their warning was clear. They'd return. Jacob turned to Sheriff Hargrove. They're trying to take her. I saw, the sheriff replied. And you're just going to stand there? The old man chewed at his lip. My job's to keep the peace, Jacob. But I know when something reeks of a setup, and this stinks worse than most. Jacob crouched beside Hunter. They'll be back. I know, Hargrove said. You've got until nightfall to decide what to do. An hour later, Rachel met Jacob at the cabin. She had her laptop open, screens filled with satellite images and data trails. They scrubbed the bays clean, she explained. The site's been wiped. But I traced the vehicle tags back to a shell company tied to a defense contractor in Virginia. And there's more. Whisper wasn't the only program. There's something called Echo Core. Jacob frowned. What is it? Still digging. But from what I can tell, Echo Core was designed to replace Whisper. Less emotion, more control. Apparently, they didn't like that Ramsey built a dog that could actually care for a child. Jacob stared out at the dark pines. They're not going to stop. No, Rachel agreed. But they're not the only ones with reach. She tapped her keyboard. I just sent a Redacted version of your story to 3 reporters I trust. If anything happens to you, it goes live. Jacob looked at her. Thank you. Rachel closed her laptop. I'm not here for thanks. I came for the truth that night. Jacob sat on the porch with Ella bundled in a heavy blanket, leaning against his side. The nurse had agreed to let her leave under protective supervision, thanks mostly to Sheriff Hargrove, who had quietly threatened to shut the clinic down if she refused. Hunter lay at Ella's feet, head resting on her toes. Is Daddy still out there? She asked softly. Jacob hesitated. I don't know, Ella. He told me. If he didn't come back, I should give Hunter to someone brave. Jacob's eyes dropped. I'm not brave. You came, she said. Hunter told me you would. Jacob blinked. Wait, what? Ella smiled faintly. The first night I woke up, I thought it was a dream. But Hunter whispered that you'd come, that you'd take care of me. Jacob turned to the dog. You can't talk. Hunter lifted his head and stared back, and suddenly Jacob wasn't sure if he still believed that. An hour later, Rachel returned with news. I've got something, she said, showing him her phone. Ramsey's bank account was accessed yesterday, in person, in Nevada. Jacob's jaw tightened. Then he's alive. Or someone wants us to think he is. Either way, it's a lead. He glanced at Ella asleep on the couch, then at Hunter, then out toward the storm creeping in over the horizon. Looks like we're heading west. They packed in silence that night. Rachel loaded her gear. Jacob fueled the truck. Hunter paced anxiously by the door. Ella slept clutching her locket. The dog curled close at her back. Jacob knew this wasn't just about running anymore. He was guarding something, a girl, a dog, and maybe the last unfinished piece of a soldier's mission. By dawn, unmarked cars swarmed the clinic, but the cabin was already empty. A single note taped to the window read, "You had your chance. Now she's ours." Sheriff Hargrove slipped it into his pocket and walked away, jaw clenched. I sure hope you know what you're doing, Jacob, he muttered. He struck a match, set the note aflame, and watched as the paper curled and blackened into ash. The sun had not yet broken the horizon when Jacob's truck crossed into Nevada, headlights slicing through a blanket of fog that clung to the two-lane road like something alive. In the back seat, Ella slept soundly inside a sleeping bag, Hunter's head resting beside her, ears twitching at every bump in the pavement, vigilant as always. Up front, Rachel Kane sat with her laptop open across her knees, a blinking hotspot balanced on the dashboard. This is the address connected to Ramsey's account, she said, pointing to the map glowing on her screen. Small, place east of Ellery. The town's called Haven. Population 218. Once a mining hub, now mostly retirees and folks who don't want to be found. Sounds about right, Jacob muttered. Rachel glanced at him. If Thomas Ramsey's alive, he's there. If he's not, someone's using his name. Jacob tightened his grip on the wheel. Either way, I'm not leaving without answers. By noon, they rolled into Haven, a town that looked frozen decades behind. A dusty diner, a lone gas station, and a weathered post office that hadn't seen a new coat of paint since the 1980s. Across the street, a church with a crooked steeple leaned toward an old firehouse, and at the edge of town, ivy swallowed what was left of a motel. Jacob parked behind a line of rusted pickup trucks and checked the GPS once more. This is it. They climbed out. Ella stretched slowly, still fragile, but stronger with each passing day. She squinted into the sunlight and let out a long yawn. Are we hiding again? No, Jacob said softly. We're searching. Hunter padded forward, nose working, tail held stiff, not wagging, but alert. His paws crunched against gravel until suddenly he veered down a narrow alley behind the general store. Jacob and Rachel followed, Ella's small hand clutched tightly in Jacob's. At the alley's end, beyond a sagging chain-link fence, sat a weathered RV, dusty, sun-bleached but intact. A curtain shifted in the front window. Hunter barked, once, then again. Jacob froze. A shadow crossed the glass. The door creaked open, and a man stepped outside. He was lean, hollow-eyed, his stubble gone gray, his hands trembling as he raised them. His gaze flicked to Hunter, then to Ella. His knees buckled. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered. "Daddy," Ella breathed. She ran to him without hesitation, throwing her arms around his neck. The man sank to the ground, clutching her tightly. Jacob stood still. Hunter did too, eyes locked on the stranger. "Your name," Jacob demanded, stepping closer. "Thomas Ramsey." "Prove it." Ramsey reached into his pocket and carefully pulled out half of a photograph, the other piece Jacob had discovered in the woods. When fitted together, the picture revealed father, daughter, and Hunter, whole again, smiling, alive. Rachel stepped forward. "Why did you vanish?" Ramsey's eyes were rimmed red. "Because I refused the order." Inside the RV, he told them everything. The Whisper program, he explained, had begun as post-war therapy, a way to train military dogs not just for combat, but for emotional support, especially for children with parents deployed or undercover. But over time, it was twisted into something darker. "They turned it into a weapon," Ramsey said grimly. "The dogs were used for tracking, for manipulation, even in political abductions." Jacob's jaw tightened. Ella was part of it. "No," Ramsey said bitterly. "She was the mistake. They ordered me to give her up. I didn't. We ran. They tried to kill us. They killed the others. We were part of a small group of handlers who walked away. I'm the last one left." Rachel's voice dropped. "Then why now? Why risk logging into that account?" Ramsey sighed. "Ella had asthma as a baby. I needed medicine, thought I could slip in, grab what I needed, and disappear again. But they were watching. The moment I accessed it, they flagged me. That's why I abandoned the RV and sent Hunter back. He's better than any GPS." Jacob leaned closer. "What's their end game? What do they want?" Ramsey met his stare, but his silence was answer enough. For 2 days, they stayed hidden. Hunter never let his guard down. Every noise sent Hunter charging toward the door. Each passing car made him rumble low in his chest. Jacob had taken to sleeping with one boot on. Rachel worked the phones, calling in favors and sending encrypted messages. The tension in the air never lifted. Ella stayed close to her father, but Jacob noticed something unsettling. She laughed at Thomas's stories, hugged him often, and listened when he spoke. But in her tears, her fears, her sleepless nights, it was Hunter she clung to. It was Hunter who wrapped himself around her in silence, who understood her without needing words. Thomas saw it too. He never mentioned it, but his eyes never missed it. On the third morning, Jacob left for gas. Rachel stayed behind, helping Ella color with stubby crayons on the back of an old diner menu. Thomas wandered the motel lot in restless circles, nerves pushing him into motion. Jacob was gone no more than 15 minutes. When he came back, the RV door swung open. Rachel sat on the floor, dazed, blood on her lip. Ella was gone. So was Thomas. Hunter paced frantically in tight circles, howling. Jacob dropped to his knees beside Rachel. "What happened?" "Ramsey got a call," she muttered, still dazed. Stepped outside to answer. "I didn't think anything of it. And Ella? He said she needed fresh air. Took her behind the motel. I didn't think twice. Jacob's blood burned. Was he working for them this whole time? Rachel shook her head, wincing. I don't think so. But maybe. Maybe he made a deal. Hunter scratched at the ground, barking sharp, urgent. He wants to track her, Jacob said. He knows the way. Rachel grabbed his sleeve. If Ramsey handed her over, they'll erase her. No names, no file, gone forever. Jacob's jaw tightened as he stared into the horizon. Then we burn their system to the ground. They followed Hunter through winding hills and over a ridge until they reached an abandoned freight depot by a forgotten rail line. Dust swirled through shattered windows, the air thick with rust and oil. Hunter barked, twice, then froze. Jacob heard it too, soft crying. He rushed forward and found Ella tied to a folding chair, lip trembling, her locket missing. He knelt beside her. Ella. Her voice cracked. Where's Daddy? He said they'd let us live if I went with them. But when he gave me to them, they hit him. Jacob pulled her into his arms. You're safe now. Then Rachel's voice rang out. Jacob! She stood near a row of crates. Inside were cages. 2 held nothing but dog bones. The third was marked K9R622. Hunter growled low, ears flat. Jacob lifted Ella into his arms, her little arms clinging tight around his neck. Rachel snapped photos of everything, cages, files, syringes, every piece of evidence. They were about to leave when the crunch of tires on gravel froze them in place. 2 black Suburbans rolled in, dust covering their government plates. Doors opened in unison. 4 men stepped out, dressed in black tactical vests with no insignia, no names. Only the cold expression Jacob had learned to recognize. Men who carried orders without conscience. Hunter moved in front of Ella, growling deep and dangerous. Jacob leaned toward Rachel without turning. Take Ella. Get to the truck. Circle around back. What about you? I'll buy you time. Rachel hesitated, then took Ella's hand and slipped into the shadows. Jacob stood tall. One of the men stepped forward. Mr. Reed, we're only here for the dog. Jacob smirked. Funny. I don't remember inviting guests. Step aside. That animal is government property. Tagged, tracked, mission terminated. He's not property, Jacob shot back. He's a hero. He saved a little girl's life. The man's voice hardened. You have no idea what you're involved in. Oh, I've got a good idea, Jacob said coldly. Enough to know 4 cowards with silencers didn't come here to rescue puppies. The lead agent raised his hand. The others advanced. Hunter barked sharply, lunged sideways, and knocked the first attacker flat. The room erupted into chaos. A gunshot cracked the air, splintering a wooden crate just inches from Jacob's head. He ducked low, rolled forward, and collided with another man, the 2 of them crashing into a rack of metal shelving. They hit the ground hard, locked in a brutal struggle. The sharp sound of Hunter's growl drew a third man's attention, but he reacted too late. The dog hurled himself forward, teeth sinking into the man's arm. Screaming, the man dropped his weapon. Jacob caught it before it hit the floor, spun around, and aimed at the last gunman. But the man already had his sights set. The gunfire thundered. Pain tore through Jacob's shoulder, sending him sprawling onto the ground. Hunter's roar filled the warehouse. In a blur of fury, the dog launched at the gunman, slamming him against the freight wall until the weapon clattered from his hands. The fight was over in less than 2 minutes. Jacob gasped for breath, his shirt dark with blood. Rachel rushed back into view with Ella clinging to her side. I'm fine, Jacob muttered through clenched teeth. Just a graze. Rachel tore fabric to bind the wound. Hunter stood nearby, muzzle stained but uninjured, watching for any sign of danger. Moments later, they piled into the truck. Jacob sat in the back seat, clutching his arm, while Rachel pressed the accelerator hard. They didn't slow until they had crossed the Utah border. 3 hours later, they camped beneath a sky glittering with stars. Jacob sat by the fire, shirt off, his shoulder wrapped tight in bandages. Rachel dabbed iodine onto gauze and pressed it against his wound. He winced, but stayed silent. Ella slept in the truck cab, her head resting against Hunter's side. Rachel's voice dropped. "They would have killed her." Jacob nodded. "They tried. I keep asking myself," she whispered, "why target a little girl? Why even a dog?" Jacob stared into the flames. "Because sometimes the smallest truths can topple the loudest lies." Rachel turned her laptop around. "I cracked another folder on the USB. Look." On the screen was a file labeled Ramsey, Final Mission. It read, "Terminate Whisper Protocols. Extract subject without clearance. As of September 2nd, Ramsey is classified as rogue operative. All Whisper Project assets must be eliminated or secured." She scrolled further. Photographs appeared. Jacob, Ella, even Hunter. Jacob's chest tightened. "They marked me before I ever stopped on that road." "They tracked everything," Rachel said quietly. "Ramsey sent Hunter to you because he knew the second he disappeared, they'd try every way possible to erase her. You were his last chance." Jacob rose slowly to his feet. "Then I owe him more than thanks." At dawn, he discovered a note tucked beneath the windshield. Just 3 words. "Keep her safe." No signature, but none was needed. Ramsey was alive. Still running. Still fighting. Their journey took them east, weaving through Colorado's twisting mountain passes, across Kansas wheat fields, through quiet towns, where kindness mattered more than names. They swapped cars twice, relied on burner phones. Ella didn't complain. She filled the hours with stories about Hunter's super sniffer and, without being told, started calling Jacob Uncle Jake. He never corrected her. He liked the sound of it. By the time they reached Missouri, Rachel had arranged a meeting with a whistleblower attorney in St. Louis. Louis, a man with ties to federal watchdog groups and no fear of threats. In the basement of a coffee shop, he examined the files, listened to the recordings, and watched the warehouse footage. "This is enough to trigger hearings," he said at last. "But understand, they won't fall quietly." Jacob glanced at Ella, busy coloring beside him. "Do it." Within 2 days, encrypted newsrooms across the nation received the files. Rachel's exposé went live with the headline, "Whispered Lies, Inside the Government Program That Turned Children and Dogs into Test Subjects." Major networks picked it up. Independent reporters carried the story further, and the truth could no longer be buried. Congress demanded an inquiry. Meanwhile, in the basement of a quiet farmhouse, Thomas Ramsey watched the coverage and finally allowed himself a long, steady breath. But justice is never swift, and adversaries rarely disappear without a fight. One night in a Tennessee safe house, Jacob heard the front door creak open. Bat in hand, he moved silently down the hallway, expecting danger. Instead, it was Sheriff Clay Hargrove, hat in hand, sweat streaking his brow. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Jacob." Jacob eased his grip slightly. "Thought I left you behind in Utah." "I thought I was done too. Planned on retiring quietly, but then I saw that story, saw that little girl's face on the news. That's when I knew I had to come here." He passed Jacob a small envelope. the kind someone didn't dare send through the mail. Inside was an old photo. Ella, Ramsey, and Hunter, smiling back when life was simpler. On the reverse side were the words, "Tell her I didn't run. I stayed to fight." Jacob slipped the picture into his wallet, then walked into Ella's room. She was awake, clutching Hunter's paw like it was a stuffed toy. Sitting at the edge of her bed, he whispered, "Your dad's okay." Her eyes brightened. "Really?" "He wanted you to have this." He handed her the photo. She stared at it quietly for a long moment. "I miss him." "I know," Jacob said gently, "but I'm glad I have you too." His eyes burned as he blinked. "So am I, kid." From the porch, Rachel watched as the wind stirred. A storm was on the horizon. So was justice. And at the center of it all was a little girl, a man who once believed he had nothing left to give, and a dog who never quit, no matter how dark the night. 2 months had passed since the Whisper Project first made headlines. 2 months since Jacob Reed and a German shepherd named Hunter emerged from the shadows, carrying a half-conscious child and secrets that shook Washington. But peace still hadn't come. Jacob now stood on the back porch of a farmhouse outside Asheville, North Carolina. The sun dipped behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, washing the fields in gold. Birds darted through the trees while the faint scent of cut hay drifted on the breeze. From inside came Ella's laughter as she watched cartoons with Sheriff Hargrove, who had become part babysitter, part bodyguard. Hunter lay stretched at Jacob's feet, tail thumping lazily, half asleep. "You know," Jacob said to the dog, "you could have chosen anyone. But you picked me, a worn-out welder with a bum shoulder and too many regrets." Hunter opened one eye, gave a soft huff, then yawned. Jacob chuckled. "Yeah, I get it." No sense overthinking. Rachel stepped out beside him, handing him a steaming mug of coffee. Her hair was pulled back, the exhaustion in her eyes lighter now, though not gone. "Federal hearings start next week," she said. Jacob nodded. "They've already subpoenaed half the contractors behind Echo. DHS is scrambling. The president even called the whole program a betrayal of American values." He stared at the horizon. "Doesn't mean much to the ones who didn't survive." Rachel took a sip. "No, but it does for Ella. For Hunter. And for Ramsey, any word?" Jacob asked. She shook her head. "Still off the grid. Doubt he'll ever fully come back. But he did reach out to the lawyer, sent even more files, enough to dismantle everything from Project Echo to the Phoenix trials." Jacob frowned. Rachel nudged him gently. "One battle at a time. Let's win this one first." Later that night, Jacob and Ella sat together on the porch swing. Her bare feet dangled as she held up her latest crayon drawing, a picture of herself, Hunter, and Jacob beneath a huge oak tree. She had even sketched Rachel with sunglasses and a laptop. "You think we'll stay here forever?" she asked. Jacob rubbed his chin. "Forever's a big word." "I like it here," he smiled. "Me too." Her expression turned serious. "Do you think Daddy's proud of me?" Jacob slipped an arm around her shoulders. "I know he is." She leaned against him, and for the first time in a long while, the night felt almost calm. Hunter, always on guard, moved closer and placed his head across both their feet. The following morning, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was Hunter's old military collar and a folded map. Scrawled on the back in bold letters were the words, "You did good. Let her grow up free." Jacob studied the handwriting for a long time before quietly placing the collar into the box of keepsakes under Ella's bed. Over the next few weeks, they began shaping a new kind of life. Jacob helped neighbors by repairing fences, while Ella started online school. She had a love for science and filled each day with endless questions. Hunter adjusted to the calm, though he never allowed Ella out of his sight. Rachel stayed nearby as well, renting a cabin while she worked on a book about the Whisper case. Publishers were already competing for it. The world outside kept moving, but in their small corner, time seemed to slow. One morning, while Jacob was chopping wood, a Jeep pulled into the gravel drive. A tall man stepped out, dressed in jeans and a worn Carhartt jacket. A scar etched across his brow, walking with a limp. Jacob's chest tightened. Then the man lifted a hand in peace. "I'm not here to take her," he said softly. "I just wanted to see her, from a distance." Jacob gave a slow nod. "She's inside watching cartoons." Thomas Ramsey smiled faintly. "That sounds like her." Hunter trotted down the steps, wary and stiff-legged, then suddenly stopped. Ramsey crouched to the ground, and in an instant Hunter bounded toward him. No bark, no growl, just a joyful wag of his entire body as he leapt onto his old partner, showering him with licks. Ramsey laughed through tears. "God, I missed you too, boy." Jacob let the reunion linger before speaking. "She's stronger now, but she still misses you." "I miss her every second," Ramsey said quietly. "But if I stay, they'll find you." Jacob nodded. Ramsey's voice cracked. "I just needed to know she was happy, that I didn't fail her." Jacob glanced toward the house. "She's more than happy. She's alive because of you." Ramsey lowered his head and nodded again. "Will you tell her I came by?" Jacob smiled gently. "She already knows." That evening, Ella sat on the porch, holding a drawing of her father with Hunter at his side. Jacob asked softly, "You saw him, didn't you?" She nodded. "He's still watching." "I can feel it." Jacob squeezed her hand. "And he's proud." She leaned against him. "I'm proud of him too." Hunter lay beside them, gazing at the stars as he always did. The media frenzy eventually faded. Laws were rewritten, officials stepped down, and the word whisper became a symbol, not just of terror, but also of hope. Because when everything collapsed, it wasn't the government or men in suits who showed up. It was a dog, a sick little girl, and a man who had lost everything but still chose to fight. They never discovered who had tipped off Ramsey, nor how the final files reached Congress. But one truth remained. Truth itself always finds a way to survive, even if it has to arrive on 4 legs. Jacob never returned to welding. Instead, he began training dogs, rescues, retired service animals, even therapy companions. The sign outside his barn read, "Second Chance K9s." We don't give up. And Hunter, he became a legend. Documentaries were made about him, and his face was placed on a congressional medal honoring non-human service. But to Ella, he was never a symbol. He was simply Hunter, her best friend, her protector, her family.